Good evening. You are watching Straight Talk with Eugene Chan. Our guest tonight is Mr. Jeff C. Junfei, the new Undersecretary for Education. Mr. C has served with the Education Bureau since 2012. Prior to joining the government, Mr. C was a school teacher himself and the Executive Director of Cervantes Policy Institute. He is also a member of the New People's Party. Welcome, Jeff.
Good evening, Eugene. Good to be with you.
Right. The new Mr. Undersecretary, our schooling system has been disrupted quite severely over the last 2.5 years with COVID. When schools reopened in April, the secondary schools were allowed to have full-day classes if 90% of the students have received 2 jabs. So the summer holidays is over. Now the school term has just commenced last week. But with the new surge of cases, recent big surge of cases, we are going to put in a new requirement to have schools to have 3 jabs for 90% of the students before 1st of November, before they can do that. So what is the current situation? I mean, it's quite worrying, isn't it?
Well, there are definitely concerns on the rising number of cases in Hong Kong recently. So the number of confirmed cases over the past week has been hovering at around 10,000 per day. Unfortunately, this also coincides with the beginning of our new school year. So what we have been doing is we have issued new health guidelines to the schools. Inside the Education Bureau, we have also been having very detailed and thorough discussions on the arrangements of schooling for the new school year. Of course, we are faced with somewhat difficult decisions to make. Shall we ban all mass-off activities in schools? Should we continue to allow whole-day schooling in our secondary schools? These issues have been debated internally in our Bureau. In the end, we decided to take a pragmatic, scientific, and evidence-based approach. We do not want to interrupt the extracurricular activities that our students are having. No. So we decided that we will not ban all mass-off activities in schools, provided that the students are fully vaccinated. And as you mentioned just now, if the 90% of our secondary school students in a school are fully vaccinated, they can apply for the whole-day schooling. So far, we have received 249 applications from secondary schools for whole-day schooling.
Right. Jeff, at the moment, about 50% of the secondary school students have had about 3rd jabs. So what is the proportion of the schools that you expect to be able to reach the requirement by the 1st of November?
Well, actually, 3 jabs is also the requirement of vaccine pass, for students over 12 years old. We are confident that with the enough time available for students, they will be able to fulfill the requirement by the time that the new requirements kicks in.
Right, Jeff, it's interesting you mentioned the word pragmatic, and you say there's enough time, but some schooling that we hear, they are saying that the 2 months period is kind of too short for them, and if just in case if they can't make it, if they have to change from full-day schooling to half-day again, it can cause a severe disruption of whatever they have planned. So what do you say to that?
Well, based on the advice from our health experts, it can provide the best protection if our students receive 3 doses of vaccination. That is based on science and evidence. As I mentioned just now, if the students want to go out to dine in a restaurant, or if they want to enter a shopping mall or any other places that are required by the vaccine pass, they have to have 3 doses of vaccination already.
Right. Would you ever consider extending the deadline? This shouldn't be brought up now, but has it ever been considered? Why November? Why not late October or even mid-November?
Before we roll out this new requirement, we have had consultation and discussions with our school heads associations and also our school councils. We are confident that there's enough time for students to take the third dose.
Right. Has the Bureau done anything to facilitate this third dose taking maybe even at the school? Have you ever considered
Yes,
that?
actually, we have been looking at the data and the statistics of student vaccination. We are also going to organize various vaccination sessions across the territory to facilitate students to take the third dose.
So one of the school principals have commented that if the high schools go back to half-day teaching, there'll be more risk of the students catching COVID because they'll be having lunch outside rather than having a sort of more COVID-protected environment in the school. So do you think if, for some reason, some schools don't reach the 90% that we were expecting, would that pose more risk for that school because the student will have to go home and do another half day of teaching at home?
It is difficult to compare and contrast the environment in school versus other restaurants outside the schools. Of course, if the school decides to have half-day schooling, we would definitely encourage the students to buy takeaway from restaurants and go back to their home for lunch. That would be the safest way for students to minimize the risk of infection. But we also have some schools in Hong Kong that are rather small in space. So there may not be a lot of space for students to keep the social distance while they're having lunch in school. So as I said, I think we cannot make a simple comparison whether the school is safer when compared to the restaurants.
Okay, I can see where you're coming from. But how about international schools? I know the international schools, they don't have to fulfill this requirement. Why are they being exempted? Because they're also school children.
Well, they also have to fulfill the requirement of vaccination. Of course, we noticed that the vaccination rate among students in international schools is higher in general. And the international schools are also generally more spacious. But most importantly, the international schools adopt a different curriculum when compared to our local schools. So there are differences, that we have to address when we make the policies.
Right. Jeff, let's talk about the primary schools. I know that they've basically been operating only half a day since January, but I read that in 66% of the children aged 3 to 11 have had 2 jabs, but only about 11% of those children have had their 3rd jab. So at this rate, when do you estimate the primary school can go back to kind of a more longer day or even full day of schooling?
Well, on the first day of school last week, I actually visited a government primary school to observe their arrangements, and also I spoke with the school principal on the anti-epidemic measures in schools. It is actually quite reassuring to notice that the school is following our health guidelines very closely and stringently. Even 2 days before the new school year, students were required to undergo the rapid antigen tests, and also the whole campus is being cleansed. So there are various anti-epidemic measures being placed in the schools.
Right.
In terms of vaccination, we have to continue to encourage the primary school students and the kindergarten students to get vaccinated. We have been, collaborating with the PTAs, the parent-teacher associations in different districts, to organize vaccination activities.
Right. As you as I just mentioned, I mean, the rates of vaccination amongst the younger children seems to be much lower than the secondary school. And it's been widely reported, many parents are concerned about the safety of the vaccine. Although it doesn't, I mean, very fortunately, we don't see any mishap, but people are still worried about the long-term side effects. So has the Education Bureau worked together with the Health Bureau to work out some sort of advice or plans to reassure the parents so that we have a much higher take-up rate of the vaccination amongst the primary children?
Well, you mentioned there have been no mishaps. Actually, there have been some unfortunate incidents. I think there are 8 students of the age below 11 who unfortunately passed away during the 5th wave. So these figures are very alarming, actually. Even one child passing away is very disheartening to us. But as all the health experts and EDB have stressed time and time again, we have to boost up the vaccination rate among our young students. I have a daughter of 6 years old, and she is now fully vaccinated with 3 doses. And me as a parent, I feel much more reassured when I send her back to school, because being fully vaccinated can prevent students from getting very sick or having acute complications when we get infected.
Jeff, let's have a break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. With us tonight is Jeff See, the Undersecretary for Education, and we have been talking about the new requirement for schools to have a 90% third jab rate in the face of rising numbers of COVID cases. So Jeff, in the first part, you have given the background that you want to do a pragmatic and scientific approach for that. But having said that, there are different views within the community. People know that many of our school children are not having a normal school experience because of all this disruption over the last 2.5 years, the possibility of not having a full day to face-to-face teaching. But given the high vaccination rate relatively to the community, and also the relatively low rate of serious disease, do you think this requirement of the third jab is reasonable?
Definitely is a very reasonable policy. Because as I said in the first part of the program, under vaccine pass requirement, it already requires students to have 3 doses of vaccination. Now we are only adopting the same approach and to replicate the policy in schools. In schools, we have to make sure that it is a safe, healthy environment. Of course, as the policymaker, we always have to balance the health risks as well as the students' learning. Over the past 3 years, there have been disruptions in our face-to-face classes. We even at one point juggle around our summer vacation timetable because of the COVID situation earlier this year. So all the experts are saying that the vaccination plus the daily RAT requirement combined to protect our students when they go to school.
Right. Undersecretary, thank you very much for reassuring that it is more than reasonable to do a third jab. But in the community, there's still many news. I mean, like on Sunday, Professor Lo Chung-Mao from the Health Bureau came out and stressed that the anti-COVID policy amongst the government is definitely on the same page. So from your experience, has all your decision that's carried out to the school children, has it been fully consulted with the Health Bureau? Have you disagreement at all during any stage?
we are one government. We certainly have consulted our government health experts, as well as the stakeholders in the education sector before we roll out the new policies.
Right, okay. Jeff, you know that Singapore has been one of the cities that we compare all the time because we have so many resemblance. So they have lifted all the requirement for wearing masks, even indoor last week. So the kids, they don't have to wear a mask at all. So it seems like Hong Kong, we are, from one government point of view, we're going quite the opposite direction. So not even being able to consider not holding full day classes. So what is your comment on that? Are we going the right direction?
Well, Eugene, I'm not a health expert. I cannot really comment on what other cities...
But how do you feel as an education person?
I cannot really comment on what Singapore is doing. To be honest, I know not a whole lot about what their rationale behind their policies. But one thing I could say is I'm actually very confident of our anti-epidemic policies here in Hong Kong. Before the fifth wave of COVID this year, I would say we actually had one of the best approaches around the world in the fight against COVID-19. Right now, both you and me are wearing masks, in this interview. If we are taking our masks off, I would probably rather do this interview on Zoom. So I would say certainly a part of our daily lives are being disrupted during this COVID. But these are not normal times. The WHO is still warning people about being too complacent in this battle against COVID.
Right. Jeff,
so I would rather take a more pragmatic and scientific approach.
Right, Jeff, thank you for bringing up the fact that we're wearing masks in the interview, because I think, I'm a professional myself and I fully agree with you. We have been a bit too complacent in the community. That's the reason why I insisted myself and the guests to wear masks, to give an example to the rest of the community until the time where we can be a mask off, but still some time to go.
See, Eugene, you are a dentist by professional training. I actually had a dental appointment last Friday, but at the very last minute, I decided to cancel it because although I want to have my regular dental check, I would have to take my mask off and I would try to be safe because if I unfortunately get infected last week, I would not be able to appear on your program tonight.
Thank you very much. Although the risk has been very low, I'd say from the professional point of view.
You can never say.
Right, yeah. Right. So, Under Secretary, let's move on to a wider perspective. So in the last two and a half years, teaching has been disrupted, students have been having different types of holidays. So some people say, apart from learning and experience with the peers, how about do you see any psychological issues being developed? Because you being a teacher before,
yes,
you won't be able to talk to the student directly except through Zoom. So what is your view on that?
According to UNICEF and UNESCO, the long period of suspension of face-to-face classes does have an adverse impact on students' well-being. Not just their academic progress, but also, as you mentioned, their social and psychological well-being. For instance, even though we are now resuming our face-to-face classes in Hong Kong, we still have our cross-boundary students who used to come to Hong Kong for their schooling every day from Shenzhen or Zhuhai. They are not able to resume their face-to-face classes yet because of the quarantine restrictions. The Education Bureau has been providing some learning support and also some psychosocial programs to these students over the past 2 years. And also the schools of these students have also been taking care of them. Right. But, as I said, being a parent myself, I do understand the anxiety and stress that parents face because without a doubt, the students' well-being has been adversely affected.
Right, Jeff, you know that people if you look at all the students there from different socioeconomic status, inevitably, those with a lower income group may have kind of disproportionately being affected by this ordered measure because they have less parental support or less resources. So is the Education Bureau aware of this? If so, what will you do to help those sort of more underprivileged kids who are suffering from less resources?
Yeah, this is an area that we are very, very concerned about. Education Bureau has been working with the school sector so that the schools can be more aware of the needs of our underprivileged students. We are also willing to provide additional support to schools with a high percentage of underprivileged students.
Right. Jeff, apart from what we have just discussed, I'm sure many parents or even viewers will be concerned. What will Hong Kong students become? Because if the rest of the world is all opening up with all the economic activities, whereas Hong Kong will still have some restriction, not only for schooling, but in general, do we have, since we have less teaching time, will the teachers rushing their education, the material faster? Or how will our students be able to catch up? And how do we do, say, for international exams? Because Hong Kong being an international financial center, we have a lot of expats going to be here. If their children are going to be educated in Hong Kong, how would they link up with other universities elsewhere?
That's a very good question because in Hong Kong, we are really trying to strike that very delicate balance, between students' health and their progress of learning. It has not been easy, because the whole pandemic situation is also evolving. But the Education Bureau has to continue to work with our school sector to decide what's the best for our students. For example, we have adjusted our public exam curriculum due to the shortening period of schooling over the past 2 years.
Okay.
We are also mindful of the various consequences on our students.
Right.
But what we can do is to provide the best support to our students.
Right. Thank you, Jeff, for sharing with us the latest measure against this high rise of cases and clarifying all the latest requirements. The children and youth are our future, and we really need to give them all the support they need in these difficult times. Have a pleasant evening and good night.